Brought to you by Saul's Jewelry and Loan, Ace Rent to Own, MD West 1, Ellsworth Crossing, and by Equitable Bank. Now, here's John Bishop and Connor Happer.
Well, for a year, this state has had a game circled on their calendars, and now that day arrives, and that circle turns into a bullseye, and that bullseye is a target on the back of Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Coach Prime, and the Colorado Buffaloes. Welcome to the epicenter of this angry cauldron of Husker Nation. Welcome to 1620 the pregame. John Bishop Connor Happer with you just outside of Memorial Stadium at the absolutely jam-packed and action-filled Blur Events tailgate party here underneath the overpass on I-180. Want to thank Ace Rent to Own and Saul's Jewelry and Loan, presenting sponsors of 1620 the pregame. And Connor, I mean, if the atmosphere in here is any indication of what we can expect here this afternoon, I think all of our predictions of a crazy atmosphere in that building across the street is going to be, well, pretty much underutilized.
You can feel it. You can feel it. Remember when the absent Josh Peterson earlier in the week said, I got that big game feel in my tum-tum?
Yeah.
And remember, John, how you were a hater about how big of a game this is? Well, what do you have to say for yourself now? This is unbelievable. What an environment that we're in at the Blur tailgate, obviously. But walking around the stadium, people have been around here for hours and hours and hours, just lighting themselves up for a 6:30 kick tonight.
Yeah, we're still 2.5 hours away from kickoff, and things were pretty much percolating like it was maybe a couple of hours before kickoff when we arrived here about an hour and a half ago. So certainly the fans definitely juiced up for this one. But remember, all of this really started last year. Remember this right after the game from Shedeur Sanders.
It was extremely personal. We go out there, warm up. You got the head coach for the other team trying to stand in the middle of the buff. Like, it's okay if like, some couple players do it. It's fine, you know. Like, just enjoy the scenery. But when you got the whole team trying to disrespect it, and I'm not going for that at all. So I went in there and disrupted it. So they knew off rip, like, nah, the Buffaloes mean a lot to me. And personally, that's what I say in pregame, and that's when I knew it was just extreme disrespect. And that's why it was the coach said a lot of things about my pops, about the program, but now that he want to act nice, I don't respect that, because you hating on another man, you shouldn't do that. So it was just all respect was gone for them in their program. Now I like playing against their DC, I like playing against them, but the respect level it ain't there because you disrespected us first.
So I have to wonder, Connor, does that same feeling from 365-ish days ago, does that still play itself out on the field? Because everyone, for the most part, has played nicey nice this week.
I hope it's amplified. I hope Nebraska comes with that edge tonight, and I hope Colorado comes with that edge tonight. That's what you get. That's the unknown quantity in a game like this, something that you can't really account for, but it's there. And you can't prepare for it completely, but it's there. And so I think, we've talked about it over and over from last year, whether that was disrespect or just a prayer circle and was not intended to be anything at all. And Matt Rule's comments before the game about his program were not directed at anybody whatsoever. If he thought that was disrespect, I don't know. I wonder if that place, something inside, will boil up something bigger this year. I don't know if it's a fight. I don't know what it might come to, but I can guarantee there'll be some chirping out there, and it's going to be intense for sure.
Well, what we've got coming up today here on our 1620 the pregame show, brought to you by Ace Rent to Own, Saul's Jewelry and Loan, also brought to you by MD West 1, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing. We're going to talk with Mitch Sherman, who I just happened to pass on my way in here to the Blur Party's tailgate. He'll join us from inside Memorial Stadium a little bit later on. We'll hear our interview from earlier this week with former Colorado head coach and now analyst on the CU radio network, Gary Barnett. But we're also going to break this game down. We're going to take a look. We haven't done it yet this year on Unsportsmanlike Conduct, but we're breaking out the big board. Big game deserves the Greeks.
Jimmy
big
the Greek
board. We'll also keep you up to date on everything that's happening in college football. But back to the atmosphere and back to what we expect tonight here in Memorial Stadium. You heard the comments from Shedeur Sanders. So earlier this week, Matt Rule was asked about, does last year play into this year?
Or anybody after what happened last year, what they said. Did you expect to? No. Everyone, guys, I don't take anything. Nothing. I mean, like everyone's got everything's got their own things to do. And like I said, like I got love in my heart and a lot of respect for what they're doing. So, nothing really bothered me. I mean, at the end of the day, Shedeur thought I felt like I disrespected his father. He was standing up for him. Good for him. My son would stand up for me. So I think I've got a bunch of players in there. I think they'll show up on Saturday.
Connor, I don't know what you thought. I thought Matt Rule was very conscious in his efforts not to amplify any of the verbiage.
No doubt.
Because we all know last year, little things were turned into big things by Coach Prime in Colorado. And so Matt Rule wanted to make absolutely sure that anything that is said this week doesn't get put back on them after the game today. That said, Matt Rule's got to know that once that ball is kicked off, heck, once the two teams see each other out on that field, the emotions could boil over, and it's going to be the team that controls those emotions best that's going to have probably the first advantage in this game.
It'd be crazy. It's only human nature. Like it's a rivalry game. It's two schools that are kind of bred to dislike each other, and it's this kind of unique rivalry. And then you have the whole Deion Sanders aspect of it. So you'd be crazy to not think that Nebraska, Colorado, each of them haven't been thinking about this for a year. It's been, I don't know if circled is the right word, but behind closed doors, undoubtedly Nebraska has, you don't put extra into your preparation. You don't change anything from a game plan perspective. You don't have to throw anything extra in there, but it's just that little edge. It's that emotion. It's undoubtedly been talked about inside that locker room this week. Undoubtedly been talked about. And so Nebraska feels some type of way about it. Colorado, obviously, still sitting on the disrespect from a year ago. And like I said, that's the unknown quantity in this game. That's the variable that we can't exactly account for. So who handles it the best is going to be really important in this. Nebraska's played all the right cards this week. They've said, we're just going to play our game. We're going to do our thing. We're going to focus on us. But it's going to show itself in this game. It will.
I have to wonder because it's rather unique. Usually in a situation like this, especially when you've got an experienced quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, where one team at least has the advantage of having been through a situation like this before. Certainly Shedeur, and he made a big deal out of it last year. We're everybody's Super Bowl. We always get everybody's best shot. But this is going to be, without question, the biggest crowd and the loudest atmosphere that he has ever played in front of, that Coach Prime has ever coached in front of. But on the other side of the ledger, Matt Rule even alluded to this week because he was asked, hey, do you remember what's the greatest atmosphere you've been around? He had to go back to something from his playing days at Penn State. But when he was at Temple, when he was at Baylor, and so far here at Nebraska, he hasn't gone through that. And then you obviously have a true freshman quarterback in Dylan Raiola. I think it's going to be rather interesting. This is kind of uncharted territory for the key guys on both sides.
Yeah.
And who's the one that can do the best to kind of just control those emotions early on? Because everyone's going to be hyped. Everyone's going to be gesturing to the crowd. You know that Shedeur's going to do is waving his watch in front of people. But at the end of the day, when the ball gets teed up and the action starts, which team handles it the best earliest? This is uncharted territory on both sides.
I think Nebraska has played it from the perspective of, hey, we're rooted in the fundamentals. We're rooted in the stuff that we have to do. That was ingrained into the program last year, and I think they feel like they have a really nice foundation to stand upon as far as that's concerned. We're gonna control what we can control. Colorado is interesting because they did play in big games last year, John. But you said it. This will be a little bit different. This will have an edge to it. It'll be bigger just in terms of how many people are there. But you get the sense that they have these big-time – I mean, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. They have those big-time players who usually tend to shine in games like this. So I feel like they're approaching it from the perspective of, hey, the lights are on. It's a big-time environment. We are built for this. And Nebraska hasn't necessarily approached it from that same perspective this week, but they're hoping – that their sort of plan and their disposition serves them well to be able to stay emotionally calm.
I also wonder which style, because these teams, even though they have two dynamic quarterbacks, and we're going to talk about this quarterback matchup and the unique nature of it here in Lincoln, in our second hour. But the two styles are different. Nebraska's going to want to run the ball tonight. They're going to want to control the clock. They're going to want to take advantage of what they believe is their advantage along the lines of scrimmage and use that to their ability. They don't necessarily want Dylan Raiola to go out and win the game for them, knowing that he may have to, depending on how this thing plays out. Right. And certainly he's going to be asked to make plays, but they're going to want to run the ball, whereas Colorado, this is about spreading the field, getting the ball to Travis Hunter, getting the ball to Horn, getting the ball to those playmakers in space. Certainly Nebraska won't have to worry about the noise situation, but I'll be watching early on how much is Shedeur putting those hands, those earmuffs over his ear holes to try to hear the play call coming in from the offensive coordinator.
Here's the rub, though, John. Colorado is built on the big play. They are built to be explosive. And so if it's going 0-0-0-3, but eventually they have to hit a 50-yard play. They have to hit a big one, and that's going to be the emotional boost that they need. So for Nebraska, and I talked about this in my keys to the game yesterday, I think it's really about – it really is about the simple stuff. It's about tackling, right? Don't let a 15-yard gain turn into a 50-yard gain, right? It's Nebraska's mantra has been to suffocate on defense, right? Keep everything in front of you and suffocate. And so they can't let anybody get too much space or too loose, because that's where Colorado's advantages start to show, and then that's where the emotional stuff starts to come in too. Yeah. They feel like they loosened up a little bit. Oh, we hit a nice one. Okay, now we got our feet underneath us. So they're dependent on that, and Nebraska's dependent on doing the fundamental stuff right. It's an intriguing matchup from the football standpoint, and then obviously the emotional standpoint too.
Who wants the ball first in this game? I think Colorado definitely wants the ball first. Does Nebraska want the ball first like they had last week? Get down, get that early score, get the jitters out, or get the crowd into the game early on, get a booming kickoff, and get this place energized, put the defense on the field first. I mean, both teams may get what they want here.
Right. I can't think of a better thing than Nebraska's defense walking out there first for Nebraska. I mean, I know that's Colorado's best against Nebraska's best. That's obviously the key matchup in this game if you're looking big picture, offense versus defense. So Nebraska's a defensive-oriented program. They've said it out loud. They've tried to be that. They had a great defense last year. They're trying to take the next step this year. So I think you put your cards on the table right away, and you say, let's line this up. Let's go defense first. And there's nothing like this crowd when they get that suffocating defense that they're that's what I'm doing. Like 100% of the time, I'm putting the defense out there if Nebraska wins the toss. And I think, like you said, if Colorado wins it, I mean, they're probably going to take the ball. So, once again, both of those things go against each other. Those first possessions are going to be really, really intriguing.
There are quite a few Colorado fans here, at least by where we're sitting. A lot of the Colorado folks worked with our friends from Blur, because Blur's been out in Boulder the last 2 times, and they made such an impression that a lot of people from Colorado said, hey, we want to be part of where it's going on in Lincoln. So we do see quite a bit of black here, but I will say this.
They'll be here.
Walking into the stadium today, it didn't look like it was anything out of the usual. I mean, CU's going to have, the 4,000 to 5,000 people in here stuffed back up in the corner. So you don't have to worry about Colorado taking over anything in this place.
I don't think so. They'll be sprinkled around the stadium, and you'll certainly hear the pops when Colorado makes a big play. But, I mean, in 2019 when Nebraska went out to Boulder, we were on like, is it 70-30?
Right.
Is it 60?
Right.
We're not dealing with anything like that. It's going to be an obvious pro-Nebraska crowd, and, that obviously is part of Nebraska's advantage in this game. But you're right. I see Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter jerseys, and I see black and gold, that's for sure. And you're right, they're definitely here, predictably closest to us at the Blue Tailgate. But I don't know what they thought of the Herbie fight that we saw earlier when somebody claimed their right to be the one and only Herbie. What a challenge we had here at the Blur Tailgate.
Those are the kinds of fun things that they do here at the Blur Party's Tailgate. You can find out more at blurevents.com. But, yeah, they had 2 guys dressed up as Herbie Husker doing a variety of different challenges, dance-off, corn-eating contest,
corn shucking.
Right. Yeah. A cheerleading contest, and then, of course, can't be a Herbie without a beer chugging contest. We did identify Blur's new Herbie, and maybe we'll see him back in action in a couple of weeks. In fact, he's sitting here in front of us.
That's our guy.
Yes, that's
Matt,
our guy here.
I think it's Matt.
Matt,
Yeah.
it might have been. We do have a poll question up for you today. If you want to visit 1620 The Zone's Twitter feed at USC, or actually at 1620 The Zone on Twitter, J-Tech Construction Zone Twitter feed. Who wins today? The line has dropped. It was 7.5 all week long. Yesterday it dropped to 6.5. It's sitting at 6.5 right now. So what do you think happens? Does Nebraska cover the 6.5? Does Nebraska win, but Colorado covers? Does Colorado win? You can vote. Poll is open until the end of this show today at 6 o'clock. And right now, 62% of you believe Nebraska wins and covers. 23% believe Nebraska wins a close game. Only 14% believe in a Colorado win. I don't know if you had a chance, Connor, today to see a variety of the different prognostications from College Game Day, the Fox pregame show, and others. I think it's running about 60-40 right now.
Game Day was full Nebraska.
Except for one guy. You want to guess who it was?
I wonder.
Yeah.
Was it Desmond?
Yeah, it was.
Interesting.
But the Fox guys were pretty much split. I've also seen others that believe that just the sheer talent of Shedeur and Travis Hunter is going to be too much for this team. And I know we'll get into this a little bit later on, but remember, there's 9 other guys on the field, and I think that's where Nebraska has the decided edge in this one.
Nebraska feels like they're better. Whatever the number is, 1 to 40, 1 to 30, 1 to 50, and Colorado has the best 2 players in this game. Now, we'll talk about this when we talk about the quarterback matchup coming up here in a minute, but I mean, there is a world where this is Dylan Raiola's coming out party, as well. So we'll get to that here in just a second. So maybe Nebraska would have some words with the idea of they have the best 2 players in the game. Maybe it's Dylan Raiola and Isaiah Nayer's coming out party or something like that, and they're the household names after that. And that's another thing that we talked about this week. After the game, I mean, Colorado, they had that buzz at the beginning of last year, and it did not go the way that they thought it was going to go. But if you rewind a year ago today, after that game, they're like, hey, Colorado, they're a playoff contender. They got a little number by their ranking.
Yeah.
They're undefeated. They beat the defending runner-up and a game Nebraska team, or at least we thought at the time. And now, I don't know if the steam has run out as much, but it's an opportunity, and maybe the last one in the sight for Colorado, that has this atmosphere. There's always going to be an attention on them. People are always going to watch their games. But Colorado as a contender, can Nebraska kind of end that today? That's sort of what I've been wondering about all week. It's just as far as how they're talked about. Does the conversation change on them if Colorado loses this game to, boy, what's wrong over there?
You're right.
Right. So I think that's another thing that's kind of on the line today, if we're being honest.
We are available for you if you want to join us here on the 1620, the pregame show, 402-951-1620. If you'd like to hit us up on the 42 Degrees, the Source hotline by your mom's house. It's also a text line as well. Those of you watching in on ZoneTV.live, especially our YouTube channel, if you're watching in on 1620, the Zone TV on YouTube, you can comment there. You can send us a tweet at USC. at 1620 The Zone. I got to get used to not saying my show's address, at 1620 The Zone on Twitter. And, of course, you can email Connor at 1620thezone.com, John at 1620thezone.com, into the Equitable Bank inbox. At Equitable, we take banking personally and answer the phone on the first ring. The orders went out as early as Tuesday from the head coach. Nebraska nice, leave it at the door.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great, great, great atmosphere, night game. People have all day to kind of get themselves ready for the game, and it should be loud, and it should be a home field advantage. It was a home. It was loud there last year. It should be a home field advantage. Like I said, Sunday, let's all be Nebraska nice on Sunday. You know what I'm saying? But, it should be a loud, raucous atmosphere.
We'll see if the fans respond. My prediction: pain. And a lot of it. Pain for people's eardrums, for their throats, for throat lozenges.
Nate Rohr.
Invest in those. Nate Rohr
is going to have a problem tonight. He's going to be like, why can't I talk anymore?
I put the challenge out to him. His long last week for third down was 9.5 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
I said, you got to go more than that, big boy.
Take the overs. Take the overs.
He said he was going to be ready.
When this place has an edge to it, it's just really special. And it's different. the Nebraska nice thing is real. I mean, Nebraska always has big crowds. They have supportive crowds. They get up for the big moments when they feel like their team is good. But now you have this combination. You referred to it as a emotional cauldron earlier. Like that's a real thing. So the edge tonight is such a big deal for the home field advantage for Nebraska. It's just different. We've made plenty of comparisons all week to that 2014 Miami game. I would expect it to be right on with that, maybe even a hair better, because I felt it last week. I heard it last week, John. I feel like Nebraska fans feel like their team is good. They like their team, right? And so it's a combination of that and a little anger at the other side. It's a perfect combo.
We are live at the Blur Events Tailgate underneath I-180 right across from Memorial Stadium on the west side. It has been a great time so far. Don't forget, visit blurevents.com and find out about future tailgates and other parties that they throw. They're at the College World Series. They go on road trips. They go everywhere. Blurevents.com.
What a setup.
It is a tremendous setup. We'll get you an update, too, on the rest of college football. Maybe an ominous omen for Nebraska. Teams that last week really showed up and showed out are struggling this week. Teams like Penn State, Notre Dame, and others. We'll explain, and we'll have a lot more, including can Nebraska's advantages be greater tonight than Colorado's advantages? We'll discuss that and enjoy some classic moments from Nebraska-Colorado days gone by, because this could be the last time these two teams' programs meet in a very long time. You're here on the 1620 The Pregame Show, presented by Ace Rent to Own, by Saul's Jewelry and Loan, also brought to you by MD West One, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing. John and Connor back with more live from Lincoln right after this on 1620 The Zone.
This is 1620 The Pregame, live from Blur Events Tailgate in Lincoln. For information on future Blur Events tailgates, check out blurevents.com.
Gives it on a counter play, zone, runs behind a blocker, 45, 40, 35, 30, 25, 15, he's gone, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Ken Pavelka on the call. Halloween night, 1992. Nebraska 52, Colorado 7. Welcome back. Just outside Memorial Stadium at the Blur Events Tailgate. John Bishop Connor Happer, 1620 The Pregame, presented by Ace Rent to Own and by Saul's Jewelry and Loan. A lot of great memories in this stadium in this rivalry, but as we heard there in that classic call, Nebraska, of course, was the great running team back in the day, and they ran wild over Colorado on that night. To me, the strength of Nebraska is offensive and defensive lines versus Colorado, whereas Colorado's advantage tonight is when Shedeur and company are on the field against that secondary. Not that Nebraska's secondary is bad, but that's where Colorado's strength is. I think tonight this game could easily be decided on whose strength outdoes the other.
Does Colorado even bother with running? I mean, that's one I've been sort of thinking about this week, and I asked the same to a Colorado insider, Adam Munster-Tiger, earlier in the week, and couldn't come up with an answer. I'm not sure what the answer to that question is. How long does Colorado decide that they want to ram it into Nebraska's defensive line wall, or at least they hope? Because if Colorado can get any sort of run game established at all, it's a gigantic advantage for them if they could open things up. And then obviously for Nebraska on defense, you know that they're going to be taking shots down the field, and you know that Shedeur Sanders is so good after things break down. So Nebraska has to tackle. They have to wrap him up. They got him 6 times last year. They got Colorado quarterbacks 7. So once again, that's where the keys sort of lie. That's the great thing about this game. The styles are so different that the keys become really easy.
Yeah.
You know, it just becomes who can play their style and who can dictate tempo. I'm not sure if Nebraska can't win a shootout, but certainly they don't prefer to do so.
Colorado last year, and obviously the rushing numbers are deflated a bit because of the 8 sacks that they took. But Dylan Edwards had 55 yards rushing, average 6 yards a carry. Hankerson had 26 yards on 6 carries. They don't need to be great in the running game. They just need to be okay. The problem was they weren't that last week. Dallin Hayden, the former Ohio State Buckeye, had just 20 yards on 9 carries. Usually the philosophy when you come into a stadium like this on the road is you got to be able to run the ball.
Yeah.
But if
They
these
didn't
are the
even
kind
try.
of numbers, they didn't try last week, but if these are the kind of numbers they're getting tonight, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, though. They have been able to win games in the past without being able to run that well.
23 for 59 last week. It's not. I mean, they're going to need more than that out of their run game. I think that's obvious, and so they'll probably try early to potentially get something established. But I think they're pretty quick to abandon it. I think they're pretty quick to go away from it. So Nebraska has to shut that first option down for sure.
Well, we talked about some of the national pundits who have been speaking on this game. And kind of on this same subject, former great offensive lineman and former NFL's Aaron Taylor on CBS had this to say in making his prediction on behalf of Nebraska.
Nebraska's defense is going to destroy the interior O-line and everything that they have to do with the offense. They're going to show up bigger than that windscreen on Matt Rule's headset.
He does have a big windstream.
He does have a big windscreen on that thing. He must really have a spitting problem. Of course, he does lick his lips a lot, as we have established.
That's true. I wonder when that's going to pop up this year. And last week, he said he had to go to the double ears, too.
Right.
We're talking about Matt Rule's headset. So I imagine he comes equipped with the double ears right away tonight. That'd be my guess.
I would think so. 1620, the pregame, brought to you by Ace Rent to Own and Saul's Jewelry and Loan. Also presented by MD West 1, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing. We are here at the Blur Events Tailgate. Notre Dame trails at halftime.
Yeah.
They have just started the second half, 13-7. Northern Illinois, earlier today, Penn State struggled against Bowling Green. So a couple of the teams that last week had some impressive performances certainly struggling here in week number 2. You hope that's not a trend that affects Nebraska, who certainly did nothing but struggle last week against UTEP.
And then elsewhere in the top 25, there was a double overtime game in Stillwater. Oklahoma State beat Arkansas 39-31. Both teams missed field goals in the first overtime, taking bad sacks. Kansas State was able to just sneak away from Tulane thanks to a nice little fumble return for a touchdown. Georgia Tech, who beat Florida State in week 1 and had some momentum behind them, they're gone. Syracuse beat them in the Dome today. So there's some wonky results early in the season, as we have now kind of come to expect. And I don't know. I don't know what that means for tonight. I don't know if that's good or bad because I don't know. Where do you think the predictions – we talked about this sort of at the beginning. It feels heavy Nebraska, but there's some late Colorado like, hey, watch out now. Don't forget about these guys. So I don't know who – I mean, Nebraska's obviously the favorite on paper, But as far as like the public perspective, I don't know. Maybe people just expect Colorado to win tonight.
Well, let's stick a pin in that and get back to it, because one of the things I have heard that has been a common thread of folks who aren't picking Nebraska is, well, what has Nebraska done in moments like this?
Sure.
So
Fair.
Nebraska's past reputation is kind of leading to a lot of folks' expectations for tonight. But when we come back here live from the Blur Events Tailgate in downtown Lincoln, we're going to talk with Mitch Sherman of The Athletic and get his thoughts from inside the stadium about tonight's matchup, Colorado and Nebraska. The last time these two longtime conference rivals will face each other, at least for the foreseeable future. Today, 1620, the pregame is presented by Ace Rent to Own and by Saul's Jewelry and Loan. Also presented by MD West 1, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing. Back with Mitch Sherman next. 1620, the pregame continues on 1620, the Zone.
$16.20 The Zone's live coverage from Lincoln is brought to you by Saul's Jewelry and Loan, Ace Rent to Own, MD West 1, Ellsworth Crossing, and by Equitable Bank.
Well, we are back here at the Blur Events Tailgate right across the street from Memorial Stadium, and this place has been hopping for several hours now, and then they opened the buffet line a few minutes ago, and now everyone's stuffing their face.
Yeah, everyone's sitting down now.
Got to get fueled up. Well, speaking of stuffing their face, I don't know if the buffet line is open yet at Memorial Stadium, but we're going to interrupt Mitch Sherman's lunch, or I guess we'd call it, what is this, like dinner?
Yeah, early dinner.
It's lunch and dinner, something like that.
I eat dinner at 4:30 all the time. Mitch, how about you?
I mean, it happens on occasion. Probably not today. The line is open, and I see that it's chicken parmesan. So,
whoa!
Still open for debate amongst the voices in my head as to whether I'm going to go and dive into that.
Mitch, I'm curious, as you made your way into the stadium today, did anything seem a little bit different than even last week, a season opener?
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah, I've been downtown since the early game started at 11 o'clock today and watched the Texas-Michigan game and that Oklahoma State-Arkansas game in the rail yard. And when I came out into the streets toward the end of those games and even at halftime of those games, I went outside and the energy is at a different level. I just went and watched the Legacy Walk as Nebraska players and coaches got off the bus to go into the Osborne Complex, and that's different. That feels different than it did last week, and you can even see the intensity on the field. You know, the Colorado players are out there. They were out there first, starting to warm up. And some of the Nebraska guys came out and did a lap around the stadium, and there weren't any pleasantries exchanged. But when they were attempted to be exchanged, there weren't necessarily pleasant replies that were sent back on the part of the from the Nebraska players. Nothing hostile that appeared, no skirmishes or anything like that. But there's an intensity in this building today that I haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it all week, but the emotional component to this one is it's obviously going to be there. Nebraska played it cool. What are you expecting from them as far as an edge is concerned? Even if you could just glean anything from watching the intensity of pregame warmups or anything like that, do you think there will be that extra oomph tonight from the Nebraska side, despite what was said this week?
I think they'll try. I mean, I think that's the intention on Nebraska's part to come out. I think they're going to their goal is to come out and, of course, play under control and not commit penalties, but to play angry and to be the more physical football team and to leave absolutely no doubt about who the more physical football team is. And that's the advantage that Nebraska has on paper going into this game. And if it was just about that, there's not much question as far as the outcome. Of course, the skill guys and what Colorado has at the quarterback position and at wide receiver and the big plays it could make even on the defensive side are going to factor heavily into the outcome. But I think Nebraska's intention to come out and be the more physically dominant football team at the beginning of the game is at the top of their mind as they go back into the locker room right now and get ready to come out for actual warm-ups. This is like the warm-ups before the warm-ups that are taking place right now. We'll see. That kind of emotion doesn't always translate in the right way. So that's something to watch in the opening minutes for sure.
Mitch Sherman of The Athletic joining us on the 42 Degrees The Source Hotline. Mitch, what we see tonight from these two quarterbacks, I'm curious from your perspective, because certainly there's going to be a lot of focus on those two. And if Colorado's going to win, Shedeur obviously has to play well. But does Dylan Raiola necessarily have to play great for Nebraska to still win this game tonight? In other words, how much of the game tonight rides, in your opinion, on Dylan's shoulders?
No, he doesn't have to play great. He doesn't have to win the game. You saw a Nebraska quarterback contribute in a large way to the Huskers losing the game a year ago. And it can't be a repeat performance of that, where the quarterback comes out and commits 4 turnovers and then contributes in other ways with bobbled snaps and drives that are killed for reasons that are unforced. That can't happen. But he doesn't have to win the game. That's not Nebraska's plan at any point early in the season, is to put games on his shoulders. He needs to manage the game. There'll be some times where he has to make throws, and they need him to make throws. But for the most part, he has to manage it and get the ball into the hands of his playmakers, many times just by handing it off, and then let the defense do their thing.
Mitch, Nebraska certainly, as you kind of just alluded to there, doesn't plan to be in a shootout tonight. They don't want to be in a shootout. They don't want to necessarily put it on Dylan Raiola's shoulders. How comfortable would you feel if it does turn into that? If it does have to be on the 19-year-old quarterback's shoulders at some point, especially late in this game?
Yeah, if it's in the fourth quarter and these teams are going back and forth and the score's in the 30s and creeping toward the 40s and it's there's not any punts and it's just who's going to have the ball last and score, then I think Colorado has the edge, and maybe it's a sizable edge. I mean, Shedeur Sanders has been in these moments and he shined in these moments. So it's hard to expect that Dylan Raiola, as talented as he is and as great as he may be one day, as good as he is right now, that he is going to be able to match that kind of precision. That kind of certainly can't match the experience. That is not Nebraska's plan to win this game. If they get to that spot, I think Nebraska will say that it feels fine, that it feels comfortable, that Dylan can get it done. But going into this game, that is not their plan or intention at all.
Mitch, do you see an X factor tonight for Nebraska? Maybe someone that hasn't been talked about. I know we've talked this game to death, but is there an X factor tonight that Nebraska might have that maybe they didn't have last year?
About what Isaiah Mayer and Jamal Banks can do and are expected to do in this game, but you didn't see Carter Nelson and Thomas Bernard's not a freshman, but you didn't see the tight end get involved in the way Nebraska wants the tight end to get involved. He's an X factor, I think, coming into this game. Corey Barney is an X factor for Nebraska on the offensive side. But again, I think the story for Nebraska is going to be more about the defense. And the tale of this game, the game will be decided by Nebraska's ability to keep Colorado at bay offensively, to not let Colorado turn this game into a shootout. So those X factors, they might come in the pass rush department. They might come in the secondary, where maybe Nebraska can get its hands on balls, knock some balls into the air, generate some turnovers that way. I think at the end of this, if it's a Nebraska victory, we'll be talking about the X factor more on the defensive side for Nebraska than the offensive side.
Do you think Nebraska is able to turn Colorado over? I mean, it's pretty simple.
Sure.
It comes down to Shedeur Sanders throwing interceptions, in which he has not historically done. Like, can they find a way to turn him over once or twice in this game?
Yeah, I think it's about being active with their hands. I mean, I don't think he's going to make terrible throws. He's not going to throw into windows that are too tight and allow Nebraska defensive backs or linebackers to step in front of the ball. But it's about getting hands up at the line of scrimmage. Nebraska should have an edge right there with its defensive line. They should be able to knock a few balls into the air. If not at the line of scrimmage, then down the field in coverage. Their safeties and corners are active. They're experienced players. They know what the game plan is. It's been emphasized all offseason to get hands on balls and create turnovers. So yeah, I mean, Shedur's great, but he's not impossible to defend in that way.
Talking with Mitch Sherman live from Memorial Stadium. He's in stadium right now. We're across the street at the Blur Events Tailgate. 1620 the pregame, brought to you by Ace Rent to Own, by Saul's Jewelry and Loan here on 1620 The Zone. Mitch, we didn't talk a ton this week about special teams, which actually I think was a good thing because they weren't a train wreck. Brian Buschini, his 2 punts were solid. I think the only drawback I saw on special teams was they kind of missed, I thought, an opportunity to kick a field goal in the fourth quarter on one of those drives just to see if they could either get Hull or Tristan Alvano going. But it sounds like Alvano's going to be the guy tonight. I think after the first week, special teams, I won't say it's fixed, but it's certainly, I feel better about it than I did coming into the season. I'm curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I think everywhere except the field goal kicker, just because we haven't seen it. I mean, he made a 20-yard field goal, which is an extra point, basically, in the opener. And, there's been concerns all through August and preseason camp and even good chunks of the offseason about how that kicker position was going to look as Alvano came off of a shaky spring game and then surgery after that. So I don't think we've learned a whole lot yet about what that's going to look like. And, watching some of the early games today, I couldn't help but put Nebraska in the position that some teams were in where they had to make field goals to send a game to overtime or to potentially win a game. And if that's the case at Memorial Stadium tonight and Nebraska's on Tristan Alvano's legs, then I think everybody in that stadium is going to be nervous. That's how it is until he shows the consistency and does it in these games. That's not an area that Nebraska can feel great about. But elsewhere on special teams, yeah, I thought it was pretty clean. It looks good, and I think they'll have some opportunities as the season goes on, if not tonight, to break some big plays in return.
How do you think they handled Dante Dowdell with the fumble from a week ago and Nebraska's supposed game plan of going at them physically? He seems like your best opportunity to do that, and he seemed like Nebraska's best back until the fumble a week ago. What do you think that'll look like going into this one?
Well, as long as it's been a good week in practice, if he put it on the ground in practice this week, then I think they're going to be hesitant to give it back to him in, any kind of a role where it's an important carry or an important situation. But if he's rebounded from that and it was an anomaly in the eyes and minds of the Nebraska coaches, which that's still the direction I lean right now. I certainly haven't heard anything about concerns going into the opener with his ball security or anything that extended into this week. Then they're going to throw him back out there, and I think he'll get a chance. He may not be the first back on the field, but I think you'll probably see him in the first half. And if he starts to run downhill in the way that we saw last week, I think his opportunities will grow as the game goes along.
Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Well, Mitch, I have no idea what's going to happen tonight. I mean, I have a prediction on what's going to happen tonight. I do know this, though. Come Monday, there's either going to be a celebration hangover or one of those you-know-what hangovers that Nebraska's become all too familiar with. Matt Rule may have an interesting challenge next week, no matter what the result of tonight is.
Yeah, there's no in-between. And there's been a lot of games in recent years, even big games, where there's been an in-between and there's been some gray area. And even if Nebraska loses, while it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel completely dejected and heartbroken and like things have just been ripped apart. And I do think for a period of time, if Nebraska loses this game, that's going to be hard. That's the way it's going to feel. for people inside and outside of the program. You don't want to say it's good that you're playing a certain opponent next week, but if Nebraska was, for example, opening Big Ten play next week, I think I'd have a much more uneasy feeling about the ability to win back-to-back games when the first one has had this much weight placed upon it. But of course, it's Northern Iowa; it's an FCS team, so we'll see. I think Nebraska could, they would be ripe for a letdown either way. But even with a letdown, you would expect that that's a victory next week.
Mitch, we'll see you inside the press box, assuming we can get away from all these crazies.
Doubt it.
It's loud in here. We'll see you. We'll see you up there, Mitch. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, good to talk to you guys.
Mitch Sherman of The Athletic joining us here on the 1620, the pregame show, brought to you by Ace Rent to Own, Saul's Jewelry and Loan, also by MD West One, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing. That train horn you heard in the background, they've been doing drinking contests. I don't know about you, Connor, but when they blow that thing, it also sends out a blast of cool air. Yeah, it's pretty comfortable. I got to admit, it's not bad in here.
They hooked us up with a nice little underneath fan here, which is really nice too. But the train horn will be a good preparation for Big Red Overreaction, which is coming up tonight.
That's a great promotion.
The train rolls by right where we're going to be at tonight in the North Bottoms, which was just a half-assed idea that we had in the middle of the summer, and now it's coming to fruition, which I cannot wait. It's going to be awesome.
I don't know how any red-blooded Nebraska fan wouldn't want to be right here, right now, even if they don't have a ticket to the game. These are the types of moments you wait for, right? This is that gets the blood flowing. It just gets the party celebration going. You just hope that the party continues.
Hey, I got
into the night.
We got a tweet here from Andy. He's got a screenshot of us trying to just jam our headsets into our ears, and that'll be Rule and Prime covering their ears tonight. Is what Andy said. If this is any indication whatsoever, nobody's going to be able to hear Jack in there.
You know what? That's what Prime should have done instead of having those guys with the speakers playing the Tinker Toy Fight song. It wasn't even it sounded like they got it from some 2-bit carny. They should have been doing their
grab a recording or just practice here.
Yes. Yeah. They would have been a lot better off preparing for the noise inside Memorial Stadium. We are live at the Blur Events Tailgate. Stacy and the gang, they do an awesome job. Find out more about the Blur Events coming near you or future Husker tailgates at blurevents.com.
Who's winning the drinking?
I don't know, but salesperson Josh was in there somewhere. I don't know if he was helping or if he was drinking.
So yeah, it looks like we have a flippy cup situation going on here. I don't know who's winning. It seems to be maneuvering its way down to the end of the line. It seems close. There's a line of Colorado fans. There's a line of Nebraska fans. It looks like we're in a dead heat right now. It's very important.
Welcome back to our coverage from Lincoln. As Connor mentioned, Big Red Overreaction.
Nebraska wins!
Will be right after the game tonight, and we will shift locations and be on the other side of the tracks from Memorial Stadium, 14th in New Hampshire. If you happen to be in the area, come on by and say hi. But we will have all of your post-game coverage, including hearing from Coach Rule. We may even hear from Coach Prime, especially if Colorado loses, all tonight on 1620 The Zone and 101.9 The Keg. Back with more of 1620 The Pregame, presented by Ace Rent to Own and by Saul's Jewelry and Loan. Also brought to you by MD West One, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing, right after this on 1620 The Zone.
This is 1620 The Pregame, live from Bloor Events Tailgate in Lincoln. For information on future Bloor Events tailgates, check out bloorevents.com.
Under center, takes the snap, gives to his fullback again. Messenger inside the 10 to 5. He scores! Touchdown! Touchdown! Touchdown!
When these two teams came in here in 1994, 30 years ago this October, it was number 2 Colorado versus number 3 Nebraska. Huskers scored on their first drive. They shut down eventual Heisman Trophy winner Rashaan Salam, and they nearly shut out the Buffaloes with traditional black shirt defense.
This play could shut Colorado down and send them packing the Boulder. Fourth man, 7 yards to go. Snap to Stewart. Makes the give. Wants to throw. They shot it. They got it back at the 50-yard line. It was Dante Jones and Eddie Stewart. I don't think there is any question, but Nebraska is clearly the superior football team here this afternoon. Reports of Nebraska's death after Tommy Frazier's injury, folks, were greatly exaggerated.
Nebraska 24, Colorado 7. That, to me, represents the pinnacle of the atmosphere in that building. Yep. I remember I was living in the North Bottoms, where we're doing the show from tonight, crossing over that pedestrian bridge and hearing that stadium and hearing the Go Big Red chants going up 90 minutes before kickoff inside the stadium. And it just got louder and louder and louder as it went through the day. And that national championship team is reuniting this weekend here in Lincoln. A lot of the guys have come back. They certainly remember that was, to me, their best moment of that season. I know the Miami win, obviously, exercised a lot of demons and won the national title, but I thought it was that day against the Buffaloes, who had beaten Michigan on the Hail Mary, who had beaten top 25 Texas, was a really good football team, and Nebraska manhandled them all day long. You're hoping for a similar manhandling tonight.
Is that the seminal moment in the Colorado-Nebraska rivalry for you?
No, to me, it's still Halloween. I mean, the Halloween game 2 years
92.
earlier, 92 game, because, I mean, that was a place that was out for blood. That's the thing, and we've got more of these highlights coming up a little bit later on. That's the thing about this series is we've talked a lot, us older people have talked a lot about the Oklahoma rivalry and how great it was, and it was. And there were a lot of exciting games. But pound for pound, Nebraska, Colorado always seemed to deliver. Certainly the 52-7 game, the 24-7 game weren't close, but most of the games were. And they came down to the last possession, or they came down to a key moment in that struggle. Of course, the Ndamukong Suh play from 2009 after the Alex Henry field goal. It's been a great rivalry, and I'm a little sad that this is going to be the end of it for what could be a very, very long time.
Well, I was looking yesterday, to your point, John, about how all this game seems to deliver. I was looking at the historical spreads, like the odds for these games. I mean, it's very often in this rivalry where the favorite does not even win, and almost every time does not cover. I mean, that's the definition of a rivalry game. You know, you look back, I mean, you just mentioned that 08 game. Nebraska was an 18.5-point favorite in that game.
Yeah.
They were an 18.5-point favorite, and they needed a 57-yard field goal and then added and won by 9 with a pick 6 by the best player in the country.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that's a great example of it right there. Colorado was just a 2.5-point favorite last year, and they won by, multiple touchdowns. Nebraska was a favorite in 2018. Scott Frost's first game. Colorado came in here and won by 3. So it's just been, you've never really known exactly what to expect. And especially over these last 3 times that they've met, where they play early in the season, and you don't have a real good grasp on who's who yet. And so maybe that's another not so great omen for Nebraska today, being the touchdown favorite.
And the majority of Prime's 14 games so far as the coach of Colorado, the underdog has won, whether it was Colorado or the other team. Because remember, after Colorado got off to that 3-0 start, they had a ton of love by the bookmakers.
Oh God,
We're working, son.
But are we taking shots? I would do a beer. I would do a beer.
Wow.
I don't want to take a shot. I don't want to take a shot.
Yeah.
But if somebody comes and yells at me and says, you have to take the shot, then I probably would have to do it because I always succumb to peer pressure. We're just going to let those sit there for a minute.
Yeah, we'll think about it.
Enjoy the ambiance.
We'll think about it. Well, I mean, it smells good. It's that
Jack Fire.
It's that Tennessee Fire. It's pretty good.
It's like the professional version of Fireball.
I wish I had a 32-ounce Coke right now from Casey's. Or something like that.
Wash it down afterwards.
Yeah, well, just, a mixer.
Okay.
Just a little bit of a mixer. But on the point, as we get ready to wrap up hour one of 1620, the pregame brought to you by Ace Rent to Own, Saul's Jewelry and Loan, also brought to you by MD West 1, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing. I know a lot of us, Connor, have picked a Nebraska double-digit win. Can Nebraska win a shootout? Can Colorado win a grinder? And maybe the most important question, can Nebraska win a close game? Because that's where a lot of the mental block comes from, not only inside the program, but with the fan base as well.
It's three great questions, and I'm going to go 1-1-1 on them. Can Nebraska win a shootout? I think yes. I think Nebraska can win a shootout, and you might see that tonight if it goes not Nebraska's first plan. Can Colorado win a grinder? No. I do not believe that Colorado.
They've got to score points.
I do not think that Colorado.
Is there a floor? Is there a floor for points that Colorado gets to this floor, and that's when their chances of winning go up?
Yeah,
I think
30,
it's 30.
30. That's the first number that came to my head too. And then you start wondering, okay, how did this really go? Can Nebraska win a close game? That is undetermined. We do not know the answer to that question yet, and it would unveil and open up a lot of answers about this program and where it stands right now if they did win a close game tonight. Can they? Of course. But have we seen them do it? Not really. Not really. So I think those are the three really important questions in this one. If Nebraska plays it slow, they could get out of here and probably, we had the Colorado fan come up to us in the middle of the break there, and he goes, what are your guys' predictions? And we gave him our predictions. You'll hear him on the show later. And he goes, what do you say, 45-42 or something like that?
45-30 or 42-35.
I go, they ain't going to get that many points. I don't think Colorado's getting that many points. But if they do, that's the game script for them to win it.
Yeah.
That's the only way they could do it. Colorado's not getting out of here with a 17-16 win. I just don't see how that really works tonight in their favor. So, yeah, that would be their script for sure.
We are live at the Blur Events tailgate. Did they brought us the whole bottle?
They're insane.
Producer Nick Grimm here has just informed they brought us the whole bottle. At least we're hydrated with
Nick,
some.
Nick, you shoot it. You're not doing anything.
Yeah, Nick, you go ahead. You know what? I'll take a little sip, though. It's very cinnamony.
All right, give it to me. Well, don't spill it on your laptop.
I just spilled it on my laptop.
It's
not bad.
Jack Fire? Jack Tennessee?
Jack Tennessee Fire.
All right, I'll milk that.
We'll milk it. We're lightweights. Hey, we're going to be in a working press box tonight.
That's right.
No drinking in a working press box.
If I walked in there and they smelled Jack Fire on my breath, I don't know. I might get kicked out. And I'd probably start table pounding, and you know how table pounding goes.
No table pounding.
No table pounding.
No table pounding. All right, that wraps up hour one of 1620, the pregame, brought to you by Ace Rent to Own and by Saul's Jewelry and Loan. Also presented by MD West 1, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing. Coming up in hour two, we'll hear from Gary Barnett, the former Colorado coach, now radio analyst for the Buffs Radio Network. We're going to talk about the other games in college football today and some of the near upsets. I think Notre Dame has taken the lead, but only by one late in the third quarter in South Bend. And Iowa has just scored a touchdown at El Assico, and they're going to go up 2 scores against Iowa State pending the extra point. It is 19-7 in favor of Iowa. We're also going to unveil the Greeks big board and get the check marks on this matchup and see if Connor agrees with where I have put the check marks tonight between Nebraska and Colorado. That wraps up hour one from the Blur Events tailgate. For more information on Blur Events coming to a game, an event near you, go to blurevents.com. They do the A+ job in organizing your favorite events. blurevents.com. Back very shortly to Memorial Stadium and the Blur Events Tailgate ahead of Nebraska, Colorado here on 1620 The Zone.
KOZ and Bellevue, Omaha, Council Bluffs. This is 1620 The Zone. Live from the Blur Events Tailgate in Lincoln, this is 1620 The Pregame. A look ahead to Nebraska, Colorado. 1620 The Pregame is brought to you by Saul's Jewelry and Loan, Ace Rent to Own, MD West 1, Ellsworth Crossing, and by Equitable Bank. Now, here's John Bishop and Connor Happer.
A host of talented quarterbacks and future pros have played as opponents in Memorial Stadium. Those of recent vintage include Kirk Cousins, C.J. Stroud, and Josh Allen. And tonight, another joins the list. But while Shedeur Sanders will gladly take all the accolades and the starring role in tonight's game, for the first time in Husker history, Nebraska has a quarterback of their own with legitimate NFL dreams. Shedeur gets top billing, but by the end of this night, the nation might be talking about a fresh new star. Dylan Raiola's second career start moves to the large stage with a chance to steal the spotlight. Welcome back to the Blur Events Tailgate here in downtown Lincoln. Alongside Connor Happer, our studio producer, Joey Colbert, our great on-site producer and very busy body today who's going to be doing a lot of shuttling between locations during the game. Nick Grimm is with us here as well at the raucous Blur Events Tailgate in downtown Lincoln. I said this on the show yesterday, Connor. I'm curious what you thought. Nebraska might be seeing the best opposing quarterback in modern times here in this stadium. I know that C.J. Stroud is a huge star in the NFL, but Shedeur is expected to be a top 5 pick and could certainly join C.J. Stroud in that kind of echelon here very soon. You're going to see a talented guy tonight. We saw him up close and personal last year in Boulder, but now the fans here in Lincoln get a chance to see him. Between he and Travis Hunter, those are two dudes that Nebraska doesn't see a lot of in opposing teams unless that team's name is Ohio State.
Stroud was so good. And when he played here in 2021, Nebraska was okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they hung in that game and only ended up losing by a score. Well, it was probably part of the one score bonanza.
8 or 9 points, yeah.
So, I mean, Nebraska kind of fared well that day. I remember, Kirk Cousins playing here. Nebraska had it their way with Kirk Cousins in 2011 against Michigan State. There's been some other Michigan State quarterbacks. Connor Cook had a bad day here in 2015 when Nebraska won that game in November against Michigan State. Gosh, you might be right, John. It's hard to tell because we have the hindsight on those guys. Stroud has become an NFL star.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know that there's been too many more in recent memory that went on to be super huge NFL stars. Will Shedeur be that? We don't know the answer to that question yet, but we know he's going high in the draft.
Yes.
So it'll be Nebraska's opportunity and the crowd's opportunity to get after a future pro tonight. I don't mind it, John, without thinking about it too much. I really don't mind it. He's a very, very good player.
And there's a very good chance that we may see the Heisman Trophy winner tonight in Travis Hunter. I mean, if he continues to put forth the kind of efforts he did last week, even if Colorado is a losing team this year or maybe is a 500 football team, just the sheer amount of plays, provided that he can survive a season like this, he's going to be in the Heisman conversation the entire season. It's really going to be down to him and, whichever 3 or 4 quarterbacks really, peak at the right time.
Yeah, it will be. We got a tweet here from Ziggy who says Shedeur puts up Stroud-like numbers playing on a team that has wide receiver talent, but that's it. Stroud was surrounded by future NFL players.
Right.
It's so hard with those Ohio State quarterbacks to really get a sense of, okay, how good are they individually? And then for a long, long time, pre-Urban Meyer, Ohio State was not good at sending quarterbacks to the NFL. They were mostly runners. I mean, guys like J.T. Barrett, he was there for a long time and put up a lot of yards and was an excellent college player, but was never going to be an NFL quarterback. Braxton Miller ended up being an NFL wide receiver. So that the comparisons are really difficult to see. And we are in an era of, there are some really talented quarterbacks and advanced quarterbacks in college football right now.
Yes.
Just in general. And Dylan Raiola has a chance to kind of add his name to the list maybe tonight, at least to the general public. But it would be hard to think about a guy with that type of talent who's coming here. He's had the production in the past, and he might be at the peak of his powers right now too. He's as far as his college career, he's as good as he's going to be, and Colorado's as well set up. At least they think so. But it's hard to really think of a past time where that's happened in this stadium.
I'll be very curious to see how much of Nebraska's game plan is put on Dylan's shoulders and how much Colorado will try to force Dylan to make plays tonight to win the game. Coach Prime alluded to it a little bit that, with a true freshman playing in only his second game, that's probably going to be the strategy tonight, is to make everybody else win this game. I asked the question of Mitch Sherman.
I think that plays into Nebraska's strategy.
I do, right? Too. I asked the question of Mitch Sherman, does Dylan necessarily need to play great for Nebraska to win this game? And I agree with Mitch. I don't think he has to play great, but I do think, well, number one, he's got to mitigate turnovers. Last year's game literally turned on the turnovers. I know the Colorado folks like to look at the flashy numbers that Shedeur put up and the points that Colorado put up, but I looked this up yesterday, and this, to me, was the most telling thing. So there were 3 turnovers in the first half. Nebraska turned it over in the first quarter. Then there was the fumble on the bad snap, or
off of Lindenmeyer.
Off of Lindenmeyer that led to a field goal. But at that point, it had only led to 3 Colorado points. Then Sims threw an interception, and that's when the floodgates opened. Before that Sims interception, which happened at 2:47 to play in the first half, so we're almost at halftime, Colorado was only averaging 2.5 yards per play and had 3 points.
Wow.
After that Sims interception, 7.8 yards per play, and they scored 33 of their points. Yes, did they drive the ball? Did they hit big plays on Nebraska's defense? Absolutely. But after that third turnover is when everything changed. And if you remember back to that game last year, Shedeur looked a little frustrated
100%.
Before they got that pressure relief valve of getting another free possession deep into scoring territory. If those turnovers don't happen, heck, if the turnovers stop on the bad snap fumble by the snap off Lindenmeyer, I don't know if Colorado probably still wins the game because Jeff Sims was a train wreck anyway, yes. But that game turned on that third turnover.
Well, remember, Colorado got a field goal before half to take it to 13-0. That's the way it went into the locker room. Nebraska, I believe, got a stop coming out of the locker room and then got their long run on the touchdown by Sims. So it was 13-7, and Nebraska felt like, boy, we played like crap today, but we're in it. We're down by 6, and we got them hemmed in, and it was the play down the sideline. I don't think it was Hunter, but it was against Tommy Hill, who will be out here on the field tonight. He was just in his very, very early days of playing corner. He got beat, and Colorado kind of took an insurmountable lead at that point. Nebraska didn't have enough offense to find it. If Nebraska doesn't turn the ball over tonight, I'm sure they're looking at themselves from last year, and they're thinking, man, if we don't turn it over 4 times, we're either in it or we win it comfortably, because it was on their terms. Yep. It was on their control, and they didn't take advantage of the opportunities that were given to them. So it doesn't have to be a touchdown every time for Nebraska's offense. It just can't be a turnover.
No.
And that's really what they have to focus in on tonight.
I think there are plays to be made tonight in over the middle, certainly in the run game. I expect Dowdell and Irvin to probably get more of the carries tonight, because I think Nebraska really wants to emphasize the strength that they have on the offensive line. But I also think there's plays to be made in the screen game. I'm trying to think back to last week. I don't believe we had a screen last week. We had those passes.
Were really vanilla.
We had those passes in the flat to Thomas Fedoni, but that was it. Other than that, it was shots down the field.
Yeah, and I wonder what else Nebraska shows tonight. They were very vanilla. The stat going around this week was they didn't blitz at all. They didn't blitz at all on the defensive side of the ball, which is amazing, the disruption they got and how they stopped UTEP's run game. I know it's UTEP, it's different. Nebraska didn't really show much on tape. Let me throw one more in there for you. So you mentioned, and I think Nebraska gets after it with the power game, and that's their first option, right? Run at their face and see how they react. Get something going there. this might be the Heinrich Harburg week. This might be the insert him into a package. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it is, but they feel like he can have the ball in his hands with power. If Nebraska was ever, under Matt Rule, ever going to throw some sort of wrench into it, some sort of trickeration into it, I think you put that guy on the field. So I don't know what the plan looks like for him tonight, but I do think he is going to be a factor in this game. I think he should be a factor in this game. So that's another option that Nebraska just didn't show last week. He was Nebraska's backup quarterback, period.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to be doing more things this week. I think we see it.
Earlier this week, and we really didn't focus on this much. In fact, we didn't bring it up on our show until this week. But here was Mekhi Bear earlier this week talking about his quarterback versus Shedeur.
Yeah, just facing Dylan in the sense that, like, he could throw. And Shedeur can throw. But Dylan can throw too.
You can't compare Dylan and Shedeur Sanders. Don't do that. That's Dylan is a different man. The way he played, the way he go out there and attack.
How they different?
Dylan is a dog. You know that. We'll see on Saturday. I put all my trust in him and his team and the guys who's blocking for him. We just got to do our part on defense.
I have to imagine that did not go over well with Colorado and Shedeur Sanders. They
heard about
it. And they certainly did. But here's what I liked about that. Mekhi Bear knows who his quarterback is. He knows what he has seen in practice. We got glimpses of it certainly last week. That's a dude backing up his teammate. This team has a little more swagger about them, and especially those defensive guys, because they know that they can eventually back it up with their play.
They love their quarterback. They trust their quarterback. It's different than putting it all on the quarterback and saying, go win for us. And there might be a point tonight where that has to happen, where Dylan Raiola has to do that. We've talked about those kind of scenarios already. But I think there's a difference in we trust and believe in our quarterback. It does such a different thing to the confidence in your team and the offense. I mean, just go back to last year's game we just talked about. How much confidence, like Nebraska got to stop on defense. Did you feel like they were going to go down the field and be able to put it together for 8 plays and score? No. And so Nebraska feels like they can do that. They showed a little bit of it last week. And, man, there will be a lot. If you're watching on NBC prior to the game, there's going to be a whole Shedeur versus Dylan thing.
Yep.
Nicole Auerbach's been here all week talking to the Nebraska program and going through all those conversations, and there will be a story about that, so people will start to know about it. I think there's a world where we wake up tomorrow morning or we turn on the chit-chat shows on Monday and we're saying, this is the Dylan Raiola coming out party. And this is not about Shedeur Sanders. Maybe it is about what they didn't do, but we have to start paying attention to this guy because, you hear people talk about Nebraska and it's like they have a lot of good things going for them, but my God, they can't get out of their own way.
Right.
And all of that stuff starts at the quarterback spot, all of it. And so I think that could be a national level reaction to what we see tonight.
Here at the Blur Tailgate, underneath the overpass, right across from Memorial Stadium. Coming up next here on 1620, the pregame, we're going to hear from Gary Barnett, the former Colorado head coach, who is now the radio analyst for the CU Radio Network, and he'll get his thoughts in on what he expects to see here tonight. That interview from earlier this week on Unsportsmanlike Conduct. That is when we continue here live from Lincoln, getting ready. We're counting down. We're about an hour and 15 minutes away from kickoff tonight between Nebraska and Colorado, and I already see folks up at the very tippy top of the East Stadium balcony.
With their balloons.
Yes, the balloons are back. I don't think I'll be able to count the actual number of balloons tonight.
They said 6,000. They were going to put out 6,000 balloons. I've already heard from a couple people in the stadium that some got loose balloons already.
That's because folks aren't used to holding them anymore. Back when I was growing up, you didn't have to hold them that long because they usually scored pretty early in the game, especially against those weak teams.
Maybe those days are back. Who knows?
1620 the pregame, brought to you by Ace Rent to Own and by Saul's Jewelry and Loan. John Bishop Connor Happer back with more after this on 1620 The Zone.
1620 The Zone's live coverage from Lincoln is brought to you by Saul's Jewelry and Loan, Ace Rent to Own, MD West 1, Ellsworth Crossing, and by Equitable Bank.
John Bishop Connor Happer back here in Lincoln from the Blur Events Tailgate underneath I-180 overpass right across from Memorial Stadium. Earlier this week on Unsportsmanlike Conduct, Josh Peterson and I had a chance to sit down with the longtime former Buffalo head coach and now CU radio analyst Gary Barnett.
Very happy to be joined by the man who used to patrol the sidelines for CU and was responsible for a handful of losses, including a very important one in
very
2001.
Famous one.
But he is now the radio analyst for the Colorado Buffalo Radio Network. Gary Barnett joins us. Coach, thanks for coming on the program.
Well, I appreciate it. That was a long time ago, guys. So I can barely remember it.
Oh, believe me, there are people around here that still remember it.
And they'll never forget it.
So you could say you've left an indelible mark on some folks.
Well, it wasn't me. I was just one person in that mix. So, but you know what? We've all appreciated and respected the rivalry with Nebraska so much. And I know it was started out of respect, and it's still there. It's just, it just gets to be college football, and you want to get all revved up for it. But there's a great deal of respect for Nebraska football, I know, here, at least in my house.
Coach, along those lines, I wonder when a week like this arrives where it seems like so much is on the line. Back when you were coaching, often it was for the Big 12 North, but certainly there is that animosity and you want to beat the other side. How do you control the emotions? And I guess for you as a coach, was that something that you were trying to focus on every day in the lead up with your players, just so things, I don't know, so they wouldn't lose control when that game finally kicked off?
Well, that, I think I've always been able to control that piece for myself. And you've got to stay on the same level all the time. And it's part of coaching is trying to train or teach your players that, the highs and the lows, they just don't do you any good. You've got to maintain the same level all the time. And so that was the challenge, because they would get geeked up for these games, but not as much as the fans, though. I think the fans get more geeked up than the players do. The players have a job to do, and they know that. And they've been preached to over and over about, don't let your emotions get in the way here. You've got to take care of what you can take care of. And all the coach speak that happens. But the fans, they're over the top, I tell you, all the time.
Yes, they are. Coach Gary Barnett joining us on the 42 Degrees The Source hotline. There was one interception in last week's game, but it was a fluky tip in the end zone. Last year, Shedeur only threw 3 interceptions in 430 attempts. For a guy who was chased and is sacked as much as he was and felt the pressure, is that one of the more amazing things, that Shedeur is so good at taking care of the football?
It really is. And he got sacked 56 times. And, that's amazing. And to only throw 3 picks. And the one he threw last week was one of the most bizarre plays. You know what it reminded me of was the play at, was it Missouri when Nebraska kicked the ball?
The Matt Davidson catch, yes. That's a great point.
Yeah, I remember that, because what happened is the Nebraska player sort of tripped and fell into our player who went down. And as he was going down, the Nebraska player's foot goes up in the way of the ball, and it tips the ball. I mean, I was trying to describe it, but I had to watch it on film to see it 3 or 4 times. But yeah, it was really bizarre. And everybody just sort of looked at themselves and said, how did that happen? But I mean, the kid's taking care of the ball terrifically. I mean, he's a great player. He really is, and he's really a good kid. But he's also knows how good he is, and he's very confident, and he thinks he can make a play on every doggone play that's called. So he's confident, and he usually does get it done.
Speaking of players that usually get it done, Travis Hunter, being so involved in the sport over the years, does it astound you as much as it astounds so many of us that he is able to play not just both sides of the ball and special teams, but to do so at such a high level, given the little amount of rest he actually has during a game?
Yeah, I have said over and over to a number of people who don't believe this, but he's the best football player I've seen, ball skill wise, skill player that I've ever seen. And that's, I'm an old dude, so that's 60 years of football or 65 years of football. He's amazing. And he's that way in practice. He's that way with every ball that's thrown. It's his. And he had 2 interceptions in man coverage last year that he intercepted off of somebody else's man. And so he's just got unbelievable instincts. He's a quiet kid on the field. Generally, he's a quiet kid off the field for the most part. But he's just one of those guys that has great instincts and great skills. And he must have great vision as well. The catch he made in the end zone last week was really a one-handed catch.
Sick.
With a guy hanging on him, and I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And, he just continues to impress like that.
Gary Barnett, former coach of the Buffs, now CU radio analyst, joining us here on Unsportsmanlike Conduct. Hunter gets a lot of the headlines, but you look back at the numbers last year and you look at the numbers from last week, Jimmy Horn had more catches, more touchdowns than Hunter a season ago, nearly had a 200-yard game last week. What do you like most about Jimmy Horn's game?
Well, he's got great speed. He's got speed. You can't. You really. He's a blur. And once he gets the ball, he's one of those guys that's as quick sideways and backwards as he is forward. So he's not very big, but they get him the ball, and I'm telling you, he just turns on a blast and he's gone. But he's a go-to guy too. Shedeur is very comfortable. We really are fortunate to have a bunch of receivers that can play, and we've got depth that we haven't had before.
Looking at the other side of the ball, the run defense last year, 240 yards per game, around there, allowed on the ground. On Thursday versus NDSU, they only got 157. I wonder what you have seen in terms of improvement from that part of their game and how you think they defend Nebraska's run game on Saturday.
Well, they've improved mostly in personnel. They have recruited, or if that's what you do when you give money, I guess that's recruiting. But they've really got some guys on the edge that can rush the passer now. They've got some guys inside that can play the run. We had struggled in that last year, and we've got pretty decent skill in the secondary as well. But they knew they had to improve the run. We've got to improve both sides of the ball in the offensive and defensive lines. And, that's a work in progress because they're all playing together for the first time. And especially the offensive line, that's a struggle. But they are better. I think that they have a nice scheme. The new coordinator from the Bengals is Robert Livingston's doing a nice job with them. And he's a young guy, and they really relate to him. So, we're better there than we were. We still gave up 157 yards last week, too, but that was a really good team we played.
Gary Barnett joining us on the 42 Degrees The Source hotline. I'm curious, Coach, kind of putting back that coaching hat on, if you were getting ready for a game like this and you were looking across and you saw that Nebraska's starting a true freshman in only his second game, as talented as he is there kind of the idea that you make him beat you because it is only his second game? I'm curious how you might approach Dylan Raiola this week if you were making the game plan.
Well, I think the general rule is that you blitz a rookie and you defend a veteran. But, Nebraska pretty much had their way last week. I mean, he had no pressure on him. I don't know if he ever had to sidestep to make a throw. It was, as I watched that game, it looked like he was playing 7-on-7. He's got a terrific arm. He's got great vision. You can see that. But he did not ever get pushed. He never had a grind that he had to go through to get the ball thrown or to get out of a bad situation. So, I would think conventional wisdom would say you want to make him as uncomfortable as you can in the pocket, and whatever that looks like. Would I do that? I don't know. I probably would. I'd probably find a way to put heat on him to some extent.
Coach, you're close to the program. You've been close to the program for a long time. I'm curious because you probably hear a lot of the noise that comes from outside of Boulder. What's the biggest misconception folks outside of Boulder have about Coach Prime and this program?
Well, I think Deion is different than anybody else, and when he played, he played like he is right now. He's very confident, and but at the same time, he's pretty humble. He's more humble than you think. He does not appear to be humble, but he's a pretty humble guy, and he is coaching those corners during practice, and he's involved with them. I think he's just got a different way of doing it, and it's new, and it's not like we've had before. And I think it's very easy to sit in judgment that what he's doing is the wrong way, and what we've been doing for years is the right way. And I sort of used this today with someone I was talking to. He says, we go back and you look at COVID, and we learn that you could do a lot of things differently. You can work from home. You don't have to be in the office. You don't have to do some stuff. And I think Deion's sort of that way. I mean, I think he's just got a different approach, and it might work. I don't know. I'm watching it, and I'm trying to look at it and say, I did a lot of things for a lot of years, but maybe there's a new and better way to do some of the things that we did. And so I'm learning as we go, and I observe what he does, and he'll be judged by how many games he wins, and whether his kids get in trouble or don't get in trouble. But that's how we'll be judged, and we'll have to wait and see, because it's a work in progress right now.
Gary Barnett, former coach of the Colorado Buffaloes. Now he will be on the radio call for CU on Saturday night. Coach, I'm guessing you probably feel the same way as I do, and a lot of other folks that are listening. I'm going to be sad that this little mini 4-game series is going away. Yeah. We don't know when the next time these programs will play. Maybe it'll probably have to be a postseason game at the way things are going these days.
Well, I totally agree with you. And the entire state of Colorado feels that way. If there was just some way we could keep it going, we'd love to. Everybody, everybody in this state, and I know everybody in Nebraska appreciates it. It's been fun. It's been great. Kids have grown up watching us, used to watch us every Friday after Thanksgiving. It was just one of those things that everybody did. So I hate to see it go as well, and maybe powers to be will find a way to reignite it for some reason.
That is Gary Barnett, the former head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, up in the press box right now, getting ready for the radio call for Colorado. Getting some word from inside the stadium. The celebrities are here. Bud Crawford is here tonight. He's wearing a number 140 Nebraska jersey.
Maybe bump that up, maybe go 150, 155. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, the students have already well populated the southeast corner of the stadium.
They have gotten a bit vulgar. They said vulgar? They said a bad word, John.
They said a bad word.
Yes, and it was directed at the other team.
Well,
what do you think that means?
What does it mean? Means there's going to be a lot of folks. I just hope that there's not something tonight, because probably the last time that I remember being in the stadium, I wasn't here. I wasn't here. We got a Buffs fan here. I was not here for the Miami game, which a lot of folks say was one of the better, more recent atmospheres. Yeah. But I'll go back a few years earlier when USC came here in 2007.
Yeah, game day.
Game day was here. The place was really lit. And Nebraska was in it in the first half. And then there was a moment where there was an injury on a kick return, and it took a while, to take care of the young man. And the stadium went very quiet. And then USC immediately marched down the field. There was the famous meme of, the running back. I'm trying to remember.
Lendell
White running up the middle from the 2-yard line, and there's no Nebraska jerseys in the photo. And the place went absolutely dead quiet.
Yeah, the rest of it was just about managing the game.
tonight, and you're not playing a team the caliber of that USC team, so I'm not saying that that's what Colorado is, but there's going to be a moment tonight where Nebraska's going to need that crowd. They're going to need the crowd. Colorado will have some momentum, and it's going to be important tonight that this place stays energized throughout.
Yeah.
Because Colorado's going to try to strike as fast as they can, as big as they can, to try to take this place out of it.
People got to find a second wind around here because everybody has come up to us and is like, I love you so much. They're hammered.
Yeah.
They're hammered drunk.
Already gone.
They don't know what they're doing.
Already gone.
So they have to go to the game and they have to find their second win. They got to get some water. It's a long day. 6:30 night game.
Yeah.
It's a long day. So students in the student section, I mean, if you're in that student section, you probably got there at about 9 o'clock or 9:30 or 10 o'clock this morning. I mean, you have been waiting for this one, so you're ready to go. If you're a student and you're tailgating in the bottoms, you're not going to walk in at 6:15 and get a seat. Not happening tonight.
Nope, not tonight. We are here at the Blur Events tailgate. These folks,
they're amazing.
They're amazing. They do an amazing job of putting on these events, and of course, they go to a lot of road games as well. Find out more at blurevents.com. And we will actually be back here. Josh and I will be back here with Nick in a couple of weeks.
It makes me want to be here again. Maybe
you're more than welcome to come join us.
Maybe I will.
You're more than welcome to come join us. We'll be back here for the 400th sellout, the Illinois game. Friday night's a great night for football in a couple of weeks here on 1620 The Zone. But as we continue, when we come back, we're going to open up the Greeks big board, and we're going to see if Connor agrees with where I put the check marks for tonight's matchup. Our presenting sponsors are Ace Rent to Own and Saul's Jewelry and Loan. Also brought to you by MD West 1, by Equitable Bank, and by Ellsworth Crossing. We will continue with more from the Blur Events tailgate outside Memorial Stadium. We are less than 90 minutes to kickoff. Nebraska, Colorado, and we are 1620 The Zone.
This is 1620 The Pregame, live from Blur Events Tailgate in Lincoln. For information on future Blur Events tailgates, check out blurevents.com.
Senior TJ O'Leary to snap it. Senior Jake West to put it down. Alex Henry to try to put the Huskers in front with 1:50 left in the game. Ball right on the end. The snap is down. The kick is up. The kick is on its way, and the kick is good! He makes it in there!
57 yards out of school record to put the Huskers in front 33-31.
That was truly one of those electric wow moments. I remember sitting in the press box up there, and, they say that there's no cheering in the press box. That's one of the louder eruptions. It was one of the rare times where it actually led to an admonishment from Bill Bryant, who is the longtime press box PA guy, about no pounding tables and no celebrating the press box, because it was such a wow moment. Because remember, up until that point, while Henry was a good kicker, he wasn't like that kicker.
No.
That kick changed his trajectory and changed the trajectory of that game.
That was, I asked you earlier, John, about the seminal moment in the Colorado rivalry. For people my age, I'm 31, I think.
He has no idea, ladies and gentlemen.
That was it for me. That was the one for me. I was a junior in high school, and I went to that game with a couple of my buddies, and I couldn't believe the kick went in. And it was like, at that point, I didn't care. It didn't matter that Nebraska was a 2-touchdown favorite or whatever. It was just about beating Colorado.
Right.
And when that kick went in, and then sticking around for the Sue stomping on Cody Hawkins, pick 6, and kind of Sue announcing himself as the best player in the country, which would come the next year. That was it for me. That was the game for me. That, and of course the 2001 game, which have very different emotions.
Oh yeah. That was a whole different ball of wax. Well, as we get closer to kickoff coming up just after 6:30 here at Memorial Stadium, we will be here until the top of the hour on our 1620 the pregame coverage, brought to you by Ace Rent to Own and by Saul's Jewelry and Loan. It is time to bring back the big board, the Greeks' big board. So we're going to look at the matchups in this game. And I have already assigned check marks. If there's no check marks assigned, that means I don't think there's an advantage for either team. I'm curious what Connor will think, and we'll start with maybe the most controversial one.
Okay?
I put the check mark at quarterback in favor of Shedeur Sanders. It's the experience.
Yep.
It's only Dylan's second game. I know Dylan could end up having a really great game and could end up being a better quarterback, but I've got to give Shedeur the advantage here because he is truly one of the best in the game.
John, I don't have any problem with it. I think absolutely you put the check in his. Now, it doesn't mean that he might not be better than Shedeur might not be better than Dylan Raiola, but we don't know that yet. So I'm totally fine with them with you putting the check mark, or Jimmy the Greek, I guess, putting the check mark there.
Yeah, the Greek did it.
The Greek, thank you.
Not me.
Appreciate that. But yeah, the guy was very good last year. He was on a bad team, but that guy got bounced. He got kicked around. He constantly gets up. He's tough. He makes the throws. He puts the ball in the right spot. He hangs in there. He is definitely the guy on this team, and definitely the straw that stirs the drink. Nebraska doesn't necessarily play it that way, although they might have a more talented quarterback. But Shedeur in the quarterback box, I'm fine with it.
Shedeur has only turned the ball over 4 times in 14 games, and that's almost 500 pass attempts. This is a guy who does not make mistakes with the football, even though he does take some chances, but he trusts his receivers down the field. How many times did we see him escape the rush last week against NDSU? That's another reason. You take care of the football at that kind of a volume. That's next level stuff. That's hard to do.
So much of what he does is after the script. It is after the initial rush gets there, and the defense hasn't taken him down because he does a really good job of evading that stuff too. And then he allows time for his receivers to get open, and those guys are athletes. So, if we'll talk about our keys here in the next segment, brought to you by Ellsworth Crossing, Farm to Fork Market in Waterloo, Nebraska. But so we'll get to that. But Nebraska's got to tackle. They have to wrap that guy up and take him down to the ground, because their biggest plays and their biggest moments come after the script. And so Nebraska has to get him on the ground tonight.
Northern Illinois has just kicked a field goal with 31 seconds left to take a 16-14 lead over Notre Dame. Wow. 16-14, Northern Illinois with 31 seconds left. We'll keep an eye on the finish of that. Notre Dame will get one crack at it, but they won't have much time. And They are now trailing by 2.
And remember, they beat Texas A&M last week on the road.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And again, that's one of those teams. There were several teams last week that really showed out pretty well and have struggled in week 2. Penn State was one. Notre Dame was one. You mentioned Georgia Tech. This is it's college football, man.
Well,
the parity is greater than it's ever been.
Especially in week 1 and week 2 with all the transfers and stuff like that, it gets a little bit different. How about Iowa State hanging right in there? They look to be dead in the water in this game. Iowa's up 19-17. Iowa's got the ball. They could try and, milk the clock out here, but this is a tight game in Iowa City as well. And Caleb Johnson has 175 yards rushing at this moment for Iowa.
I did not assign a check to defensive secondary, and Colorado fans are going to say, wait a minute, we got Travis Hunter. What are you talking about? Travis Hunter's a great player, no question. Shiloh Sanders is also a solid player, but I really think, and we'll talk more about this in the keys, I really think Shiloh could be a target tonight, not necessarily because he's a liability as a defender, but he may be a liability emotionally tonight. And Nebraska,
good point.
1-5 in the secondary, I think is a solid unit. You've got one really great player in Travis Hunter for Colorado.
I would say the experience is the thing that Nebraska is going to be leaning on here. And we saw Hartzog get beat last week against UTEP, but Nebraska's got guys who have been around for a long time in Gifford and Singleton on that back end. They'll play the Rover a little bit as well. And it's a big game for Tommy Hill.
Yeah.
It's a really big game for Tommy Hill. I want to see it against a really, really good player. All the buzz about him at the end of last year and how he came into his own at that position. Can't wait to see him against Travis Hunter or Jimmy Horn or whoever he's guarding tonight.
Next 3 checks all go in Nebraska's column. I already mentioned it earlier. The defensive front and the offensive line, big advantages to Nebraska. And then, of course, the running game as well. Last year, people forget Nebraska actually ran the ball okay against Colorado. 222 yards. They averaged 5 yards a carry, and that's even when you take the sacks out of the equation. If they get that kind of a performance tonight, complemented by whatever Dylan gives you, provided you don't turn the ball over, that's a recipe for success.
Couldn't agree more with the Greek. Defensive front, offensive line, running game, all should belong to Nebraska tonight. It's a team that just wants to approach their business that way. The stat that I keep going back to, if you want to look at this year, Nebraska defended 50 plays a week ago, which is obviously a huge credit to their offense and putting drives together. Nash Hutmaker was on the field for 15 plays last week. Ty Robinson was on the field for 21 plays last week. Those guys are fresh, and they are ready to attack a Colorado offensive line that everyone says got better, but definitely still has questions up front. So I love Nebraska's defensive front. That'll be where they eat tonight.
I did not assign a check mark to special teams, mainly because not really sure what we're going to get tonight from Nebraska. We know that Tristan Alvano is going to be the prime kicker tonight, but he hasn't had to attempt any long field goals. You're certainly hoping you're scoring touchdowns instead of field goals tonight. But I did want to remind folks of this. Remember after the spring game, Ja'Cory Barney got tackled by Tristan Alvano, mistaking him for one of his teammates. Here is what Ja'Cory Barney said after the spring game back in April.
That kickoff return was crazy, bro. The kicker, I thought he was my teammate, so I was going to get ready to celebrate with him. And as soon as he tackled me, I'm like, but I know it's going to be in me, it's going to be crazy, but they're going to forget about all that week 2. And I'm taking it back on Colorado. So
they're going to forget about it when I take one back against Colorado. He called his shot 5 months ago almost.
Nebraska had nearly half of their punt returns that they had all season last week against UTEP.
Yeah.
So they're not afraid to return them. Isaiah Garcia-Castaneda didn't necessarily look explosive, but he looked competent, and he looked like he made the right decisions. Nebraska got good punting last week, too.
Yes.
And for all the conversation about field goal kicking, they all went in. I mean, there was one, right? Or two. So it went in. It was a short one for Nebraska. So we'll see if that crops up as an issue for them tonight. But Nebraska in the return game could be a bit of an X factor because they want to do it, and they can do it. That's a difference from years past.
The check mark for wide receivers and tight ends goes to Colorado. and that, with Hunter, with Horn, with that very quick group. But, we really haven't talked about Nebraska's wide receivers and their role in this game this week. Great game from Isaiah Nayor last week in his first start here in Lincoln. And what the role for a Carter Nelson might be tonight as well. And Jamal Banks, the great catch in the corner of the end zone. I think those receivers also want to show that, hey, we're here too, and we plan to contribute something.
I think Nebraska has a lot of good players that they could go out there and say, hey, look, go execute, and we can do this. And I think last week showed us a little glimpse of, and especially Nair, I would pinpoint him here. Nebraska might have a home run hitter in Isaiah Nair, and that is different at the wide receiver position that Nebraska hasn't had, since the beginning of the Frost era.
Notre Dame is about to attempt a 62-yard field goal for the win.
And they whiffed it.
And it got blocked, and Notre Dame is upset.
See ya!
By Northern Illinois,
Bye.
16-14.
Northern
Wow.
Illinois winning in September. It happens sometimes.
It certainly does. So the first big upset of the day. Incredible. And in fact, there's folks outside the Blur tailgate that's stopping along the fence line just so they could see that moment. Final check mark before we take our final break here on 1620 the pregame. Check mark to coaching. I give it to Nebraska here. It's a cohesive staff. Remember, Coach Prime changed out both offensive and defensive coordinators. Robert Livingston comes over from the Bengals, and Pat Shermer is now calling the plays for Coach Prime. But you remember how it was, kind of hit and miss last year with Sean Lewis. There was a bit of a disagreement when you have, your son as the quarterback, and if they're not quite getting along, it can lead to your job going away. So I give the advantage to Nebraska and coaching.
Continuity, I think, is a really big deal. And a lot of people got after Marcus Satterfield last year for how the offense went. I think he's ready to take a bit of a victory lap here, because it turns out it's hard to call plays when you're as handcuffed as Nebraska was a year ago. So they feel like they have the right people in place. And for Colorado, it might be a plus for them, but it's an unanswered question at the very least. We don't know exactly how that's going to look, especially when they meet adversity.
One final segment, and then Connor and I are going to head on over to the stadium. A reminder, we will be back right after the game tonight, live from the North Bottoms at 14th and New Hampshire here in Lincoln for Big Red Overreaction on 1620 The Zone and 1019 The Keg. So you'll want to tune in right back here on 1620 The Zone and 1019 The Keg immediately following tonight's game. 1620 The Pregame brought to you by Ace Rent to Own and by Saul's Jewelry and Loan. Back with our keys to the game next on 1620 The Zone.
1620 The Zone's live coverage from Lincoln is brought to you by Saul's Jewelry and Loan, Ace Rent to Own, MD West 1, Ellsworth Crossing, and by Equitable Bank.
The masses of humanity are now leaving their tailgates. It's a log jam of people trying to get out of the tailgate lots and across 10th Street and over to Memorial Stadium, where the Sea of Red is awaiting tonight's epic showdown, Nebraska and Colorado. Back here, John Bishop Connor Happer, final segment on the 1620, the pregame show. It's time for our Keys to the Game, brought to you by Ellsworth Crossing, Farm to Fork Market in Waterloo, Nebraska. My first key, Connor, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, Nebraska's got to make their advantages greater than Colorado's advantages. That means running the ball, being effective there. That means controlling the line of scrimmage on defense. I don't think Nebraska has to match the 8 sacks that they had last year in this game, but that havoc rate, which is your percentage of plays that are forced fumbles or tackles for loss, deflected balls, or interceptions, you need that sucker to be north of 20%. Last week it was at 25. It needs to be north of 20% tonight. Even if you don't get all the way there, make sure that pressure is there. But if you have a chance to sack him, get him to the ground, because Shedeur Sanders has the ability, even though he doesn't run a lot, he has a great ability of extending plays.
Very curious to see how Nebraska plays it just from a how many are we going to rush standpoint. That'll be one of the interesting first parts of this game. My first one, we'll go along right with yours, basically. Body blows. Go right at them and see how they react. If they want the physical fight, then Nebraska knows they have the answer to that question. If they don't, then they have their option for how to best win the game. So body blows, body blows, body blows. It might take some time, and Colorado might hit a big play in the meantime, but body blows. Keep it going all night.
I think there's an opportunity tonight for Nebraska, if their heads are cool, to get a free 15 yards, maybe a free 30 yards. Shiloh Sanders, he can be a hothead at times. This is a young man who got flagged and cost his team a third down stop in the first half last week against NDSU. I thought he could have been flagged 2 or 3 more times for late hits. I think in an emotional game, you got to take a page out of Tom Osborne's book from 30 years ago. You knew that Miami was going to throw fists and try to get you to do something and get into your head. That's what Colorado likes to do, like to get in your head. Be the cooler team. Don't let your emotions get the best of you, and it may cost Colorado tonight if Nebraska does not fight back in that way.
It all plays into the environment thing that we've talked about, obviously, all the way throughout this show. Nebraska brings it from that regard. Doesn't have to get nasty or anything like that from the crowd, but make them react, make them feel like they can't breathe, and get them to that point where they were at last year and get them frustrated, and then you start seeing those type of things happen.
Got another key?
Should I get to it?
Yeah, go for it.
Sacking Sanders.
Yeah.
Sacking Sanders. Last year, Nebraska pressured Colorado quarterbacks 29 times, 17 hurries, and then the 8 sacks. I think you want him to get the ball out early. I think their big plays are made after stuff breaks down and their athletes have the ability to get loose and make plays down the field. Can Nebraska win straight up, talking about 4-on-4 up front or 7-on-7 up front, and not have to dial up too much extra pressure and allow Shedeur to kind of move around and make the plays that he wants to make? Bottle him in. Obviously, there's the sacks, which is the big part of this thing, but more so, you have to get him on the ground, to your point before.
I think tonight another key is being cool under fire. I think Dylan Raiola is going to be a target tonight for Colorado, that they're going to try to put the game on his shoulders. CU was not particularly exotic last week. They ran a lot of cover one. In fact, 70% of their defenses were cover ones. Now, while I expect them to change it up a little bit, still, they would like to run a lot of cover one tonight because they're going to need those defenders down in the box to try to stop the running game. Well, last week against cover one, Raiola was 3 of 5 for 94 yards and both of his touchdowns. So the pressure's going to be put on him to make plays. I don't think Dylan has to play great tonight to win, but he will need to make some plays tonight for Nebraska to win. But being cool under fire, I think, is going to be key tonight for Dylan.
Last key for me, John, tackle, tackle, tackle. Again, It's pretty self-explanatory, but don't let a 15-yard play turn into a 50-yard play. That's where they get their energy. That's where they get their boost. Last week, Nebraska didn't blitz at all and played pretty suffocating defense. Nebraska missed 14 tackles in this game last year, and it allowed them to get loose and feel good about themselves. Nebraska missed 5 tackles in week 1, and Matt Rule still said, we might want to clean up the tackling thing. So clean it up, and their athletes are slippery. There's going to be situations like that, but you can't let a medium play turn into a big play where they get energy and momentum off of it.
And the last key, it's the most obvious. Take care of the football. Take care of that football like it's a pet rock. Shadur's not going to turn it over. Nebraska has to match that. If Shadur's not going to turn over, Colorado's not going to turn over, they need to match that. Colorado last year under Coach Prime in their first 3 wins went +6 in the turnover game. But when breaking even or losing the turnover margin, Colorado was just 1-7. So Nebraska can't be sloppy with the football tonight. I gave you the stat earlier about how the game turned last year after that Sims interception late in the first half. Nebraska's defense had CU bottled up, and they had the momentum, but the offense gave it back. So taking care of the rock tonight, obviously, is going to be – it's the most important key, in my opinion.
I feel like if Nebraska wins the turnover margin, they win the game. And if they lose the turnover margin, they still have a chance. But if they win it, they're going to win.
Yep. Well, we're just about ready to make our way over to Memorial Stadium. We're going to get into that flow of traffic.
We got to make way for the Mahomes motorcade, though.
Yes, the rumors are getting stronger that Patrick Mahomes will be in the house tonight. We want to thank everyone at Blur Events for hosting us. We want to thank our sponsors, Ace Rent to Own, Saul's Jewelry and Loan, MD West 1, Equitable Bank, and Ellsworth Crossing. Our producer was Joey Colbert. Our on-site producer, Nick Grimm. Connor and I back after the game tonight. Big Red Overreaction live from Lincoln in the North Bottoms. Tune in right after the game right here on 1620 The Zone and 101.9 The Keg. Until then, enjoy the game, everybody. This is 1620 The Zone.